If the president told you to shoot Americans, would you do it? That's not a movie line. That's a question Pete Hegseth just refused to answer under oath.
You're now recognized as the gentlelady from Hawaii, Ms. Tokuda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I agree we've had many performances today, but what we'd like is some answers. Mr. Secretary, did you invite Elon Musk for a briefing on war plans with China to the Pentagon? Yes or no is simple.
There's been a lot of hyperbole and incorrect reporting around that situation, but we did invite Elon over to come talk to us generally, but there was no war plans being discussed.
Okay, so whose idea was it to invite him to the Pentagon for a briefing? You mentioned you served at the pleasure of the president. Was it the president's will to have him come and be briefed?
Well, as you know, at that time, Elon Musk was leading up DOGE efforts, and we've taken a great investment in DOGE at DOD, and so getting his input on how we make DOD more efficient makes a great deal of sense.
Okay, but don't you think it's a conflict of interest for the world's richest man? Many of the contracts that the DOD is engaged in, billions of dollars of contracts going to his company, and he is, as to your point, was leading DOGE, which was involved in cutting hundreds of contracts, but also becoming intimately aware of the platforms and the requirements that would be given out for new contracts. Did you not think it was a conflict of interest to invite someone with financial interests into the Pentagon to have first-hand knowledge of what they could then bid on for their own, enrichment?
Ma'am, it was just an informal discussion, but I'll tell you, anyone that knows our Defense Department knows we show no preference to any company other than what your capabilities are, and we're grateful for the places where his companies benefit our national defense.
So for a $280 million donation, the world's richest man with companies intimately linked and involved in billion-dollar contracts with the Department of Defense gained access into the Pentagon. So would you say that any company right now that has multi-billion-dollar contracts with the Department of Defense has access to the Pentagon right now? 1-hour briefings with you personally?
On the regular basis, I meet with many people and many different companies and many different aspects of our defense industrial base to ensure we have the best possible capabilities. It would be imprudent to do
Well, I'm
otherwise.
sure for an investment of $280 million, Elon's investors are quite happy that it's come out into the billions. I want to jump questions right now. Mr. Secretary, on January 6, 2021, rioters and looters attacked federal law enforcement officials, vandalized and destroyed federal government property, and caused an estimated $2.7 billion in damages right here at the Capitol. Would you have sent the National Guard and the Marines in on that day?
Well, unfortunately, President Trump requested the National Guard in advance, and that was...
It took him quite a long time. I'm asking you, as Secretary of Defense, would you have sent in the National Guard and the Marines on that day? We had 140 Capitol Police officers injured. One died the next day. Would you have sent in the National Guard and the Marines?
As I said, President Trump directed National Guard to be there in advance.
And I think you can look at the record of how long it actually took for him to actually send them in. But it's good to hear that it sounds like you would have sent in the National Guard and the Marines on that day in which the insurrection was taking place right here at the Capitol. Mr. Secretary, during your confirmation hearing, you failed to deny the conclusion that you would carry out an order to shoot protesters in the legs. So let me be direct. Given what we are seeing across the country right now, would you carry out or issue an order by the president for our military to fire upon protesters actively engaging in their civil right to exercise free speech, their First Amendment rights? Would you give that order from the president?
I assume you're insinuating what's going on in Los Angeles, and I wouldn't...
Not just Los Angeles. If we take a look at protests throughout the country, it's a simple question. If directed by the president, would you order our military to fire upon protesters? Simple yes or no.
Ma'am, we have, as you know, and as this committee knows, we have standard rules of engagement that are in place that give guidance to our troops, and they abide by them.
I'm asking what you would do. Again, you said you serve at the pleasure of the president. Is that not true?
I do serve at the pleasure.
So if the president told you to shoot people in the legs, would you do so? Now, you failed to answer this question as well in your confirmation hearing when asked by members of the Senate.
Because I refuse to accept a false hypothetical that's attempting to put me in a corner and make it look like a representative.
At a time when we have more Marines and National Guard in Los Angeles than we do in Syria and Iran alone, I don't think this is a hypothetical. This is an actual situation that we are dealing with right now. So again, I will ask the question, the last 14 seconds I have, would you order our military to shoot at their fellow countrymen, if ordered by the president?
I think it's interesting that for 4 years, insurrection was the left's
I think we know your answer. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
In L.A., they were...
Gentlelady yields back. Gentlelady's time's expired.
What Jill Tokuda did here wasn't theatrics. It was constitutional triage. Because when the Secretary of Defense is asked, plainly, directly, with no rhetorical fog, whether he would order U.S. troops to fire on American protesters, and he won't say no, that is not a gaffe. That is a warning siren. Tokuda boxed Hegseth into the simplest moral and legal question imaginable. Does the Constitution come before presidential loyalty? And instead of affirming that civilian protesters are not enemy combatants, Hegseth dodged, deflected, and hid behind rules of engagement, as if those rules magically enforced themselves without human judgment. As if history hasn't already shown us what happens when military leaders stop saying no. This wasn't hypothetical. The United States currently has more Marines and National Guard troops deployed domestically in Los Angeles than stationed in Syria and Iran combined. That's not normal. That's not routine. That's not democracy functioning as intended. And when asked whether he would refuse an unlawful order to shoot Americans exercising First Amendment rights, Hegseth chose silence. That silence matters. Because lawful orders are not defined by who gives them. They are defined by the Constitution. And the Fifth Amendment, the First Amendment, and generations of military doctrine are crystal clear. The U.S. military does not exist to suppress political dissent. The moment that line blurs, every American, left, right, or apolitical, loses something fundamental. Tokuda also exposed something deeper, a defense secretary who sees accountability questions as partisan attacks and constitutional guardrails as inconveniences. When he pivoted to attacking the left instead of answering whether he would fire on fellow Americans, he told us everything we needed to know. This is not someone reassuring the public. This is someone preparing them. Democracy doesn't usually collapse with tanks rolling in. It erodes when leaders normalize the idea that orders don't need moral resistance, and when those entrusted with force refuse to say where their line is. Jill Tokuda didn't ask for drama, she asked for clarity. And Pete Hegseth's refusal to give it should alarm every single person watching, regardless of party. Because the most important words a defense secretary can say are sometimes just two simple ones. I would not.